Welcome everybody to the Governance and Audit Committee today. The first item on the agenda is election of chair. Do we have any nominations of a lay member to be chair, please?
Andrew Blackmore.
Is there a seconder, please?
I second that, please.
Super, thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, are you willing to accept the nomination, and then we'll go to if everybody's in favour or not?
Yes, okay.
Okay, super. All in favour? Lovely. I'll hand you over to the new chair.
Oh, right, thank you. You did catch me out. I thought you were doing items 1 and 2, in which case I apologise and thank you. Okay, the next item is the appointment of vice chair. Do we have any nominations, please?
Tony Eason.
Nominate Tony Eason.
Tony, someone to second that? Thank you. Tony, are you willing to accept that nomination?
I'm taking on, yes, okay. Give it a whirl.
Thank you. Do we need to take a vote? So all in favour? Thank you. Welcome, Tony, and thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Peter.
Say it with sincerity. Okay, right. Let's get into the meat of the meeting then, so to speak. Okay, item 3, apologies for absence. I haven't received any. Wendy, I've been notified of any absences, please.
No, I haven't.
Great. Okay, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest to record? Apologies, I can see Martin's hand up. Martin, over to you. And yet again, you're on mute.
In my excitement, I pressed it twice. With regards to items 7 and 8 on the SRS, that provides services to a number of organisations, and I'm chair of the Governance Audit Committee at Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council and a member of the Governance Audit Committee at Blaenau Gwent, both of which receive those services.
Okay, thank you, duly noted. Okay, let's go to the public open forum item, and then I will make some introductions. Okay, the public open forum element, item 5. Wendy, have we received any representations from members of the public, or do any members of the public wish to address the committee?
We haven't received any representations, no.
Okay, yet again. Okay, good. Right, well, let's start the meeting properly then. So, hello, welcome to a meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. We have a few changes in committee membership. I think I'd like to start by noting that councillors Ian Chandler, Laura Wright and Tony Keir have moved on. We thank them for their contribution over the period and wish them well on whatever they are doing currently elsewhere within the council. And secondly, I'd like to really welcome to the committee councillors Ben Carlard, Anne Webb and David Jones. Welcome, look forward to working with you over the forthcoming period.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, if you could move on then please to item 6, which is our action list. We've got a few outstanding actions which I would appreciate some updates on. We'll start with item 1. Item 1 is in respect of the key collaborations and partnerships. That's down to Richard Jones, Data and Performance Insight Manager, Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, who's not actually here at today's meeting, and Andrew Wathen, who was our previous Chief Internal Auditor. But my oversight, I should welcome to this meeting also, as apart from the new committee members, Jan Furtek, our new de facto Chief Internal Auditor. So welcome, Jan, to the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, item 1. Who wants to take that in terms of the where we are with this item? Jan, would you like to start, please?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just an update where we are with this. So the internal audit review of the Council's partnership arrangements has been completed and the draft report is ready for issue. So hopefully after a final read through by myself, later on this week it should be issued. The delay of issuing of that report has been due to the change of the audit management team. Under item 11 on the agenda today, we're going to discuss the internal audit plan for 23-24. I can confirm that the Council's partnership arrangements have been considered as part of the risk assessment in drafting this plan, and there will be at least 4 reviews due to be completed where we have identified the services operating in partnership. So these will be housing benefits, council tax, revenue shared service, all with Torfaen County Borough Council as the lead authority, and the youth offending service where Monmouthshire is the lead authority for that arrangement.
Thank you. Have you anything to add, Richard?
Just to say we'll obviously consider the findings from the internal audit review and respond to the recommendations accordingly.
Great, thank you. I do note the actions that are recommended to close at this stage. I suggest we keep it open until we receive that final report, Wendy, if that could be noted. Okay, if we move on to action 2, it's in 2 parts. Firstly on finance team capacity, and then second in respect of trend analysis. The former action is recommended to close, but before we agree to that, John Davis, Head of Finance, could you give an update in terms of where we are with finance team capacity, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we have made some progress on this since the last updated committee. We have made some appointments throughout the finance teams themselves, albeit the appointments into some of the senior posts are still ongoing. We're mitigating that delay by continuing to prioritise some of our key pieces of work. There are some delays sitting within that, but we're comfortable at the moment that we can manage those, and we're looking to complete those that recruitment process now over the next probably 6 to 8 weeks. And get a full complement in place, which will support the authority and the team through the rest of the year.
Okay, thank you, John. So clearly you'll need to make some priority calls in the interim until you are fully resourced. But what are the implications? And maybe if you could start off by talking to us about where we are with delivering a draft set of accounts to the Audit Wales, please.
So I think members won't be surprised, I guess, that we're continuing to focus on the stressed financial situation that the authority is in. Members will have seen the outturn report that went through Cabinet recently, and our month 2 or early forecast is due to come through the committee cycle in July. I think it's right and proper that we continue to focus on that area, ensuring that we are continuing to make best use of the resources that we have, and continue to deliver on some of that service change that really is going to deliver and produce savings throughout the year. What that does mean is that probably some of the focus on year-end accounts has been taken away a little bit. We've communicated that to Audit Wales regularly through our meetings with them, and highlighted that we are hoping to meet a mid-July deadline in terms of that draft account document, but there are still many variables within that could delay that slightly further, but we are very hopeful of coming to a resolution on that in July and handing over to Audit Wales.
Okay, John, so I understand the situation you're in. I understand that you need to make some priority calls, as I've said a few minutes ago. But could I just go to Rachel Freitag from Audit Wales? You've heard what John Davis has said in terms of he is hopeful, albeit cannot be certain at this stage, of delivering a draft set of accounts by mid-July. Can I just confirm, does that align with your expectations, and are there any implications for you as far as Audit Wales is concerned, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just for the benefit of any new members who were in the previous meeting, I'm Rachel Freitag, the Financial Audit Manager at Audit Wales. Yeah, that timetable that John just outlined is in line with my expectation. So all the things being equal, we should be on for a November certification date. we're regularly in contact, so I'm sure any delays to that will be communicated, and we'll deal with those issues as they arise.
Okay, thank you. I have a further question or point to make to John, but before I do, can I just check for members? Do we have any questions or comments for John? Phil?
I put my hand up in the chat, Chair, but you asked my question, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you. For some reason, I can't see the chat, so I'll just ask Wendy to help in a moment. Oh, now I want to ask just John. So. Okay. So yet again, I understand the situation you've set out, John. This action is you've recommended to close. I'm not overly comfortable with closing to this stage. I note you've got some recruitment activity sort of in train, but I do think this committee will want a further update in July, where hopefully you'll be able to confirm that you've now sort of filled all those vacant positions, and we'll have a better view in terms of how quickly you can get back on track. I do wonder whether this committee needs a written report just to set out what those vacancies are, how long those positions have been vacant, and how soon those positions will be filled, and the implications arising. I'm assuming such paper has been drafted for internal purposes with officers, but I do wonder whether we need to see something at this committee. No need to pine at this stage, but maybe you could just pick it up offline. But I do want a better line of sight in terms of the resourcing position and implications, especially in relation to financial control and meeting those obligations that you've set out. Okay, so Wendy, the conclusion of that is if we can make sure that that action remains open for the time being. I do note that the second part of that action has recommended is TBC, so we'll keep it open for the time being, unless, John, you wish to pick up it now.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just on the second point there, I have circulated a document to Wendy, who I hope will circulate to all members. Apologies for the slight delay in circulating that, but we wanted to ensure that we had consistency between the information that was being brought forward to committee and that which will be going to investment committee later this month. So I think as long as you're happy, Chair, that I would agree that could be closed.
Yeah, happy on that basis. I haven't seen the report. John, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, I just a little bit concerned, Chair, that we tend to sort of let things slip back to another month, and if there were any issues that could likely to be delaying that situation, perhaps they could come back to us even at an extraordinary meeting, really. I am concerned going forward. We need to get these details and these accounts sorted and know where we stand, especially with the recruitment. Not being able to recruit people is detrimental to what we're doing.
Okay, thank you, John. I share your concerns. So yet again, I do appreciate John Davis, difficult position. The whole world is short-staffed. We understand the issues you're facing, but clearly as a committee, we have some oversight responsibilities which you are aware of, and I'm not sure we've got the right visibility over what the situation is and the implications that how they're going to play out. So we just need some more comfort about this current situation, actions in train to address, and when they're likely to be addressed by. So take that away, have a think about it, but happy to pick up offline.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm without my PC, so I'll just make it up as I go along. Okay, the next action listed as action 4, it's the Audit Wales outline plan, and that was in 2 elements. First element, for myself to have sight of the Audit Wales letter and revised audit timetable, which I've seen, so thank you to Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, for sharing that with me. I have no comments on that, and happy to close that element of the action. The second point is in respect of training materials on ISA 315. I haven't seen any training materials. I'm not too sure whether any is available, and maybe I could have asked Rachel Freitag, Audit Wales, to come in at that point, please.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I just had a flick back at the minutes to remind myself what the discussion was last time, and I believe we sort of agreed that if anything sort of became available, or if we were running anything, that we'd let you know. There's currently no sort of central ISO 315 training materials that we're running with governance and audit committees, albeit any sort of specific relevant information to Monmouthshire I will share as and when. Happy to sort of keep it on and keep it in view if you'd like, but there's not anything specific at this stage.
I'm happy to close both actions on that basis, on the understanding that you will sort of update the committee on any relevant matters as appropriate.
Great, thank you.
Okay, moving on to action item number 5. That's in 3 parts, I believe. Yep. First part, people strategy and asset management. I note it's still open with no recommendation to close. So I'm not too sure who's going to pick up on this. Thank you. Richard Jones, Performance and Data Insight Manager. Update, please.
Yeah, and it's probably relevant to part B as well of that. So that actions come from our regular Audit Wales work programme report we presenting to you. So the feedback you provided around the structure and content of the report will include in the next report, which is on the work programme for October. So perhaps we can put a target date of October, and then you can assess whether we've addressed that in the report we bring forward to you. Do you want to move on to part C as well, Chair?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, in terms of there's a question of Councillor Easton. I've just been looking back at the minutes. I note this refers to a national report produced by Audit Wales we covered in our last progress update. I just want to check, have you had that response? And perhaps, if not, you could clarify the question and we'll work out whether it's something we need to respond to from Monmouthshire or ask Audit Wales colleagues on any national findings they have.
I think I'm going to have to get my head around that with you, because I can't relate back to that last meeting, and I haven't been well the last 8 weeks, so perhaps you could talk about what it was exactly. I can't really remember. I know there was something in the actions you had, but I can't remember exactly, quite honest.
Or perhaps if we revisit the notes, and perhaps with Wendy as well.
Go back to the minutes.
Yeah, and get that to you.
Okay.
I must apologise.
No, it happens to us all. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to action number 6, the Whole Authority Complaints Report, and that's just a request from a committee for a future report to include a weighting system. Let's keep that open for the time being, please Wendy, as an aide-memoire. Item 9, that's the Strategic Risk Register. Yet again, 2 elements. First element, an update on remaining elements of Risk 4. And I think Richard Jones did provide an update to us early this week. So I'm happy to close that, but looking to members for any contrary views. No, I think we're happy. The second one, I assume, is in work in progress, where we asked officers to further refine the structure of the document. So happy to keep that open for the time being.
Yeah, but the next review of the Strategic Risk Register is on the work programme for November, so we can perhaps have that as a target date, if you're agreeable, Chair. Yeah,
okay, November as a due date. Thank you ever so much. And finally, action number 12, that's where we asked for the forward work programme to be updated. I do know it's been updated and included in the meeting pack, so I'm happy for that to be closed, and thank you, Wendy. Okay, right. Where does that take us? That takes us to item 7, I believe. I've just got my laptop back. Okay, right. Item 7 is a presentation from Matt Lewis on the role and purpose of the SRS. So welcome, Matt. Welcome, Kath. Thank you for sparing the time. Let me just say a few words by means of introduction. So clearly, welcome to our committee meeting, and thank you for sparing the time to come and talk to us. Give us an overview of the SRS. For us as a committee, it's really important. We up until this time have had a limited understanding and visibility over the SRS, given its criticality to what we do in Monmouthshire, and especially bearing in mind the role and responsibilities of this committee. So we do welcome you. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. today and trying to get a better understanding in terms of what you do, how you do it, and the interaction piece between the council and SRS. And hopefully you're happy to take questions after your presentation. So Matt, Kath, over to you please to talk us through your presentation and other matters.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair. So I put the presentation up on the screen I'll walk through it and kind of talk you through as we go. You've already introduced us. I'm Matt Lewis, so I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the SRS, and Kath is my deputy. So we've actually run this presentation through a couple of times in Blaenau Gwent and in Newport. We've done the same thing for their audit governance committees, and it has worked really well on the basis that members change, the SRS changes, so it's useful to come back and give an update as to what we do, who we supply services to, and how our organisation operates, is governed and is audited, and we think that's quite useful for members, certainly. So I won't read through it word for word, but we work with Blaenau Gwent, Torfaen, Monmouthshire, Newport, and Gwent Police and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Not quite Merthyr yet, though we'd love to. I know that was mentioned at the start. If there's a link to Merthyr somewhere, we're more than happy to go and see them. So we're a collaborative service. We operate through a single management structure. We are all host employed by Torfaen. That was kind of purely a choice at the time working through it. It wasn't specifically had to be Torfaen. It was just the one that happened to come out in that process. And we work with wider public sector as well. So we're involved with lots of other organisations, Welsh Government, Welsh Local Government Association, other local authorities around the area, and the Centre for Digital Public Service. So I feel we're quite well plugged into a lot of those organisations and can help us and help them move forward for sure. So we thought it was useful just to get an idea of the size of the organisation. So across the 5 partners, £16.8 million annual budget, so sizable organisation. Got around 65,000 education customers, learners, teachers, right across 140 schools. Around about 11,000 corporate customers, so that's all our users in the 5 partners. From a connectivity perspective, we've got 470 broadband connections, so you have a broadband connection in your house, so we've got kind of 470 buildings that we supply services to across all 5. 220 people in the SRS, typically, it's round about that number, but that's the FTE we've got. There are 6 organisational partners, 2 data infrastructures, and the most important number at the bottom is it's 1 SRS. Our staff work across all 5 of those organisations. You would be hard-pressed to find an individual that doesn't work or hasn't worked in at least more than 1 organisation across the SRS, and that is our big sell. That's the whole reason that we exist, and that's how we've made a success of what we've done the last 10 or so years. So we've got our own mission, vision, and values. We exist to bring together all of the things you need across 5 organisations and try and do those things once. And that's the most simple way I can put it. We don't want to be building 5 things. We don't want to be having 5 groups of people look after 5 different things. So we try and shrink that down and consolidate it down into the minimum we can every time we do things. We've got 3 strategic aims that we've agreed with our strategic board, and I'll mention the board a bit in the next couple of slides. But innovating with experts, modernising the employee experience, which is one of the most important ones, and kind of powering up the cloud. Everybody's shared to the cloud. Everyone's probably got a different view of what the cloud is, but for us, it's a publicly available infrastructure that we get best value from when we move to it in scale. That's the principles behind everything that we're trying to do. So, just to confirm who our partners are, we've got the 6 logos there: Newport, Monmouthshire, Torfaen, Blaenau Gwent, Gwent Police, and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. As most people probably know, it's two separate corporate bodies that exist in the policing space since mid-2010s, I think it is now. As you probably do, we run surveys, we talk to people, we meet with groups from the organisations, we run national surveys. And all of you want pretty much the same thing. You want things to work when you turn them on. You want things to be quick. You want the ability to run some things yourself and do things yourself. You don't want to be kind of beholden to an IT person every time that comes in and says, I'll do this for you, do that for you. We want to try and pass as much ability to do things over to users as we possibly can, and kind of removing a lot of legacy tech and how things used to work into new ways of working for sure. And money's been mentioned a few times already, I think. So, a really important one to us is everything we do absolutely has to be value for money. And there's a budget page a little bit further on as well. So everyone's pretty much the same. Everyone wants the same thing. our skill and our job then becomes how do we actually make that happen for everybody with the minimum resource that we possibly can. So we've got a governance framework that we operate to that we've built over the last 4 or 5 years maybe. So everything on the left-hand side in the light pink, that's our formal governance structure. So we have a strategic board. Each organisation's chief exec and an elected member is on that board. For Monmouthshire, it's Councillor Rachel Garrick. That board is principally direction setting. Where are we going? Where do you want us to go in the future? Underneath that then, we've got a Finance and Governance Board, which is Treasurer's Section 151s, so that's Peter Davis for Monmouthshire. And that board is all about, is this collaboration affordable? Are the things they're asking us to do, are they affordable? And are they the right things to do? And then Business and Collaboration Board, which is typically a transformation director, so we've got Sian on there for Monmouthshire. And it's the key individuals who have the responsibility for digital within each of the organisations. So really, basically what I was trying to do was business and collaboration transformation directors, they come up with the things to do. Finance and Governance Board, can we afford it? Strategic Board, approve the direction of where we're going. That really trying to boil down what each of those boards does. And then at the bottom, we've got what we call a One Wales governance group. So that's making sure things are secure and set up as they should be. And all the kind of accreditation tests and certificates that you get are driven out of that sort of work. Everything on the right-hand side then in the blue, that's all internal to the organisations and SRS. So, we've got our own SLT, we've got performance meetings, we've got task and finish groups, we've got what we call a delivery group then with partners. So the red box, everything I've talked about so far is run once with everybody. The red box is individual per partner. So Kath will bring the team in to talk to Monmouthshire about what do you want from us over the next month? What have we done for you in the last month? That meeting then is every month, and we're making sure that we know and are attuned to what you want, and we're doing the things that you need us to do. And that meeting happens individually for all the partners. There are strategic board recommendations that we've had from the past. So we have a strategy, we have things that we know you want us to do. And the only things that will appear on this list are the things we do for everybody. And we will update the strategic board on a quarterly basis of the things that we are doing. So there's some really bold, big things in there that we've done over the last few years. Office 365 is massive, and we've done a lot of work in that. Certainly COVID sped that up and was a positive for us in progressing some of those things. But as you work your way down that list, it's just a flavour of the kind of things we're doing across all the partners. And we will use the same people for those things. So it might not be that everyone gets it at the same time, but it absolutely will be that you will all get it in a consistent way. And you might be organisation 2 this time, you might be organisation 5 next time, or organisation 1 the time after. Principle being, we want to use skilled staff who've done this once, so it's quicker every time we do it after, and that works very well. So a bit about the kind of normal performance and how we're monitored. We have an SLA with the authority. We have one with each organisation that we provide services to. We've got a scorecard that we monitor internally on a monthly basis, and it goes to the strategic board on a quarterly basis. And this is just one of the quarters of the scorecard as a sample, and it might be a little bit small, sorry, but it's just to show that we've got a live Power BI dashboard of our service provision to each of the organisations. So this one just happens to be the finance one. All of our other quarters are all achieved. I wanted to show one that was a mix of achieved and not achieved for specific reasons. So green is where we've done it, we've met it, everyone's happy. Orange is kind of where we might be heading towards a not achieved for this particular one. And then red is obviously not achieved. So as an example there, this is a current scorecard for us. The OPCC and Torvine, TCPC, they're both not being achieved from a budget perspective. That was because at the start of the year, we agreed a number. Midway through the year, both of those organisations asked for additional something. We didn't adjust the budget. We wanted to report back on the original budget at the start of the year. So that, for me, is a more honest view of are we meeting the original targets, even though we've agreed to adjust those as we've gone through the year. And then we do the same thing for our other 3 quarters of our scorecards. So we're monitoring finance, internal services, service to the customer, and our own internal learning and development. So we've got measures around all of those things. And they'd be available to the group every quarter when I send them to the strategic board. I'm sure they could then be provided in because they're public papers. They could come to this committee, no problem. So just a few kind of key achievements over the last few years, specific for Monmouthshire, because that's kind of the important bit for yourselves. So from a staffing perspective, we have got a successful integration of all staff into one model. They are working across all the organisations, and that gives 220 staff in an IT organisation much more development and kind of progression opportunities. If you go back to how it was before, that might have been 33, 34 people in Monmouthshire with an IT-specific discipline in an organisation full of accountants, procurement people, waste, all that kind of stuff. So they're not in that discipline. Whereas when you put those 33 people into a wider organisation of 220, opportunities open up and you've got lots of different ways you can work. From a core service perspective, we deliver on the SLA at or above SLA every single month, and that gets reported back into delivery groups and into the strategic board. So we'll adjust those measures going forward to make it more and more challenging for us to actually meet. But we have met all those targets as we've gone through the year. We don't fall on the overall target any month if we go back the last 12 months. And then just some projects to mention, which you may know from being governors possibly, or from being part of the organisation. EdTech was a massive rollout of education equipment and new infrastructures for all of the schools across Monmouthshire. So that took best part of 2.5 years from start to finish, but made a massive difference for schools. The move to Office 365 and Teams, so you've also got Teams telephony right across the authority, and that is probably more advanced than a number of other local authorities across Wales, because we're being asked, can we provide our architectures, can we provide our documents for the work that was done to other LAs, which we absolutely do. We're open book, nothing, we don't keep anything back. They're more than welcome to learn from what we've done, and we've shared with lots of organisations. And then Monmouthshire successfully migrated to a new data centre. That was a business case from November 20. The work was delayed a little bit because of COVID. But Monmouthshire was the second and third, because Torban and Monmouthshire were kind of neck and neck almost if it's a race. But to move to the new infrastructure in the new data centre down in Vantage in Newport, you moved across and all of your services are provided on the exact same infrastructure now as all the 4 LA partners. Massive reduction in cost. You've only had to buy something once instead of buying it 4 times over, so huge benefits for that project. And that, you are now all in a safe place, whereas previously that might not have been quite the case. There were risks around the previous provision. It was ours, so I'm happy to say that, but there were growing risks around that provision, so everybody is now in a safe place. And the final one, cyber security, SOC and SIEM. SOC stands for Security Operations Centre, SIEM stands for Security Incident and Event Management System, and the two are very closely linked. One reports into people to say, something's going on, you need to look at this, there's a risk. We were the first to implement this, nobody else was doing it. There is now a programme called SOC Cymru, which is a national provision that Welsh Government are funding to put in place across the whole of Wales. And we're right in the centre of helping them define, understand, and go out to procurement for their SOC across SOC Cymru. And again, we're more than happy to help. What we've learned and what we've kind of built along the way, we provided into that group, and they're very grateful for that. Financial arrangements perspective, just so I guess you can understand the scale of the Monmouthshire investment in that overall 16.8 million budget for the SRS. The total coming in from Monmouthshire as a whole is 3,056,000. That breaks down very broadly into 3 categories. So we actually recover 710k of income from schools and from a few other areas. And that's because obviously there's a big provision to schools, there's quite a number of people associated with that. So there is an SLA, as we do with all our partners, it's not just Monmouthshire. All of those costs are recovered from schools across Monmouthshire, so that relates to 710k. 738k is for direct contracts, things like your Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, which is your largest cost in that contract. And then the rest is kind of your cost for your broadband lines I mentioned earlier, and the people that provide the services across the SRS. So that's the kind of 1.6 million contribution at the bottom. But that's broadly how the budget breaks down. And it typically relates to the size of the organisation. So if you are a bigger organisation, then your budget contribution to the SRS will be a bit bigger because you have more people, you've got more expensive contracts, and so on. Just some really brief kind of thoughts about what our future positions are going to be, and we're working on this currently with the strategic board. So we've actually delivered most of our strategy from 2020 to 26 early, primarily due to COVID, and because of the need for the organisations to bring things forward, like Office 365 and like sharing of things. So that did kind of speed up and bring things forward for us. So we're now starting to look at what else can we do? What can we do over the next few years? And certainly from talking to Sian and Sian's counterparts across the organisations, there are themes that pop out from those conversations. You know, everybody's looking to better use their data they have in their organisation. Absolutely, you know, we all want to do that. And there is a Welsh local government project which we're now kind of working in towards as well, which helps us with that. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, AI, and robotic process automation with the RPA stuff recently. It's absolutely everywhere. We've just been working with Socratim, actually. It's a national institute on a policy for the use of artificial intelligence because it's such a hot topic at the moment. You know, how do we safely use that? How do we ethically use it? How do we bring it into the organisation without creating any concerns or creating any risk for our citizens and for our organisations? Digital skills is a huge one. You know yourselves that you constantly have to learn and change and figure out how you use this stuff that you're given. Same for citizens, same for us, and we need to figure out what our staff need as well. So you'll have your digital skills program, but we need to think of our own. What skills do we need for the next 3, 5 and 10 years to prepare ourselves to be able to deliver and to continue to deliver the growing pace of things that you need as organisations? That's really important for us. And the two at the bottom are probably a bit longer term ones, but are a constant as well. So cybersecurity, very similar to the AI conversation. It's rapidly increasing. The number of attacks rapidly increases. The sorts of organisations that get attacked rapidly increases. Whilst we feel we have very good protection on the inside and outside, you absolutely cannot rest on that. You know, you always have to assume breach, always have to assume that someone's trying to do something and someone's in your organisation. So we will continue to grow our cybersecurity function and the support it provides. And then net zero and sustainability. So we did a lot around net zero when we moved data centre. You know, energy usage, the type of energy that we use in the new facility, that's all been really positive. We need to figure out how we keep that going forward. You know, use of laptops, how do we change that so it's more sustainable, use of all the things that we do, and make sure that we're always on top of that one. And I know that was a super quick whiz through everything that we do. We do a lot more, but I'm happy to take any questions or clarify anything that anybody wishes to.
Well, firstly, Matt, thank you. That was a very interesting and sort of helpful presentation. Lots of information there, and it won't surprise you to know that members have questions. So I'll go to members first for their questions. Tony, you're first, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I picked up on page 14 of your presentation the 738,000 to the MCC budget. Before I could think about what that was, it turns up again on page 16, page 20, and then it's got the monetary contribution of 3 million, 700,000 covered by income from services, schools and others, then 738,000 direct contracts, and then the contribution 1.6. I understand the maths, but I don't understand what that page actually means. I can understand you're getting income for services schools, that's you driving that, but what the 738,000, can you explain that more? Because it then leaves a requirement of 1.6 to come from Monmouthshire. Am I correct in my mathematics?
So, I'm not a finance person, but okay, so the 3,056,000 is the total budget line that we give to Sian and Peter every year. That's what we require from Monmouthshire to fulfil everything that we do for you. 709,000 of that is services to schools. So Sian and Peter then work with Nicky Wellington. Here's the SLA cost to all the schools. This is your part of that cost. So strictly speaking,
This is the bit I'm concerned about.
Yeah. So maybe I should have put 2.3 million at the bottom, because the total number we require from Monmouthshire is the 738 plus the 1.6. I was just trying to split it out to show what each one does. So the 738, that is passed straight out to pay for contracts that you require. So it will be Microsoft Enterprise Agreements, it might be Adobe software, it might be support for Wi-Fi points. It goes straight out the door. So we've got no ability to control any of those costs.
So 2.3 basically.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other question, you're providing these services to 6 authorities. You haven't mentioned CCTV. Now you provide CCTV in SRS for Torfaen and Monmouthshire. Is that all?
Correct. That's correct.
how many cameras are on show at any one time for Monmouthshire and Torvine, and how many operators do you have to monitor those cameras? Because there are concerns in my area about the provision of CCTV and the reporting of live incidents.
The number of cameras, I honestly couldn't tell you. I think there's about 60 cameras that are monitored per LA, is somewhere around that number. And there's a 24-hour rotation of CCTV shift, and there's one person on each shift. So there's a couple more in the days, because there's a kind of a team lead that will exist in the control room as well for days. But outside of hours, so kind of 5 in the evening until 8 the following morning and weekends, it will be one person per shift that monitors Patriot fire alarms, CCTV cameras, and monitoring the control room in general.
Is that an efficient way of using the, well, do you have enough staff for you to do the work more efficiently? Because we're finding, as councillors in the area, that the reports come back, we don't get the feedback, and then we've got to go looking back in time to look at what's been recorded rather than have live incidents. Have we got enough staff between us and yourselves to provide a running service, as I might say? One operator of 60 cameras says he needs plenty of eyes.
Yeah. All I would add is that the cameras are set to zoom and focus on something when there's activity. So if there's something specifically we're looking for, that camera will be trained on highlighting to the operator that something's happening. And I think there are lots of examples of where they've been tracking people across cameras with kind of Went Police involved as well to make sure they understand where people are going, or use recordings for court cases, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's probably a conversation outside of the meeting to figure out what that specific issue is possibly, and whether we need to do something different with it, definitely.
Okay, fine.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Thank you, Matt. Okay, let's go to Ben, please. Your question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Matt, for the presentation. It was really interesting. I put my hand up before you kind of touched on it, really, but my question was about the sustainability of SRS, and you briefly mentioned about renewable energy, your data centre in Newport. I wonder what future plans you had about, closing that gap towards net zero, and about the power consumption and where the power comes from for your data centre. Thank you.
So when we let the contract for our new data centre, the previous one we had was managed by us, run by us. It was in the middle of Glenavon, and not using renewable energy. We couldn't get a supplier who would supply us with guaranteed renewable energy up in where we previously were. And now down in Newport, the data centre is right next to the silicon factory that City Dealers set up. So that's where we are. Moving down there into I give you a sector was capable of around 180, 200, a 6-foot tall cabinet. The Newport data centre, this professional hyperscale data centre, capable of over 20,000 racks. So it's way different. It's a proper professionally run data centre managed by professional data centre people. And as part of that, they've got both on-site and kind of a certificate that they will provide to us to show where the energy is coming from. And we just didn't have that before, so we can get that for you and we can provide it into you so you can see exactly where it's coming from. But we did, I think it was a slightly different contract that we had to prove that it was 100% renewable. We could have gone down a route of none, but we didn't want to do that. So we picked the 100% certifiable route so we could show it. And that actually was driven from a conversation we had in Monmouthshire when we brought the business case into Monmouthshire, actually. I had that question from somebody, and we hadn't really majored on that in the business case. And having brought it here, we then brought it to the front of the business case as a real value add.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. A local governor of a school in my ward in Magra and Undy, and I just wondered whether you're happy with the ED Tech implication that's gone forward in the last 12 months. I think you'll find that some schools are feeling that they're not getting value for money and are tending to go out and look for alternative quotations. So I just wondered whether you were aware of any issues with the implementation, really.
Yeah, so I don't think it's an issue with the implementation. I think and we've had this conversation in Monmouthshire recently, meeting the EdTech standard comes at a cost. And if we want to be able to say to Welsh Government on the back of the grant, we meet EdTech standards, this is how we meet it. And Mike, who's going to be presenting a little bit later, he actually audited our EdTech implementation, and we can prove to Welsh Government that it does meet the standard. I honestly, the schools who aren't in SLA, it may meet the standard, I don't know. They may do, I have no idea. But from our perspective, you have to buy certain equipment off a list of catalogue items. You can't step away from the catalogue. Certain items like iPads, when they get to a certain age, they can no longer connect to the network. Again, that's defined by a Welsh Government standard. And when you bring together all of these things which make the standard and which force you down a route of, if I want to use these devices on this network to access this thing, that's when you start to realise how much it actually costs to be on that EdTech certified network, if you like. So that's our issue. And we're discussing at the moment, do we reformat the SLA in some way? Go out to Monmouthshire schools, ask, actually what options do you want to see as part of the SLA? There seems to be I don't quite know why, but a trend of just going straight out. And that always pains me, because the benefit of what we do is the more people that are in, the more the cost reduces for those that are in. So every time someone steps away, the cost increases for others. So we're desperate for them to stay in. I'd much rather have a conversation about what sort of things do you no longer want us to do that allow us to reduce the cost of the SLA. Because I think there are two different services that get provided, and there are possibly hidden costs in going the other way that maybe they're not quite aware of when they sign up. And I guess a good example of that is in Newport, we've had 5 schools return back into SLA who were out before we took over Newport schools. They've had that few years of experience of working with a private provider and realised that, these costs weren't included, or I can't have that, I can't do this. And, everybody's different and there will be different reasons, but we've got the flip side in Newport where some are coming back in, and the opposite in Monmouthshire where some are looking to step away.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, my observation was that they should look at the bigger picture, really, and I think that that's taken on board in the unit that I'm involved. But maybe, perhaps, forgive me, you could get a bit closer to them and explain your USP. Because you have a USP, that's definitely for sure. And I think that it's important that perhaps you could get closer, because none of these issues have been involved in your audit. I can't pick it up, but there's any issues, it's always a good report. But I think you ought to report that there is an issue there, and admit to that and fix it. And by fixing it, getting closer to the client. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, a fascinating report which helps us understand a bit more about how the system works. To follow up on John's point, but in a more general way, obviously the service has now been running for a number of years, and some of the numbers involved in terms of the funding of it are quite large, obviously, but I'm sure you would argue it's value for money. Is there sort of any evidence you've done about if individual local authorities were going out, how much it would be costing them, and therefore sort of what a bargain this is? It would be obviously again a good selling point for you to put forward, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, it's a great question, which allows me to give a great answer. So we've recently done a benchmarking exercise. So I'm a kind of volunteer non-exec on a national body. I mentioned them earlier, soccer team, and as part of that, I can see national benchmarking across England and Wales. So I know that the lowest cost organisation in the benchmarking exercise for percentage of IT budget compared to overall organisational budget is the lowest one was 2.2% and the average was 2.4%. Our percentage for our partners ranges from 1.7 to 2.1 as a percentage contribution of the overall organisation. So all 5 of our partners, certainly the 4 LA partners, because that's the direct comparison, our 4 LA partners are under the lowest in the UK in the benchmark exercise for the percentage of IT budget against overall organisation budget. And when we deliver on the SLA that we're asked to deliver on, and we're doing it at kind of 0.4, 0.5% less than most other organisations, we think that's quite some achievement. And in a recent conversation, I won't mention them by name, but there's a local authority in Wales we were dealing with recently, and they were progressing a lot of things and moving a lot of things forward. Their percent budget against the overall organisation budget is 2.8%. But if you double that budget, we could do twice as much as we do now, arguably 3-4 times more, because we do it in a different way. So, yeah, I think that proves a really positive value for money story while still delivering everything we need to.
It absolutely does, and I'm currently trying to do the maths, but we're in an order of hundreds of thousands of pounds potentially of saving to this local authority every year, which is not to be sort of ignored. Can I very much change tack a little bit? The next item on the agenda is the internal audit report onto SRS, which is very helpful, and we'll consider that. But do you provide the local authority with any other assurance reporting year end, along the lines of the kind of things we might ask any other third party provider of services, just to check that things haven't gone away? To the best of your knowledge, everything is up and running. So the kind of year end assurance reporting. Do we have a system like that?
Not aware of a specific one. I do an annual report to the board. I think my answer to that will be we do it on a monthly basis. So Kath's delivery group meeting I mentioned in the presentation that she does with Sian, that's a monthly check-in to make sure everything is working as it should, to make sure the projects are running as they should. If there are issues, the service isn't perfect, but where there are problems and gaps and issues, they will be dealt with Sian in that monthly meeting, on the basis that we don't want to wait 12 months before we see anything that is going awry. We want to pick it up in that monthly monitoring meeting and resolve it straight away.
That's really helpful. We'll chat to Sian later, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, please.
Thanks, Chair, and I want to do a bit of catching up, really. Back in the old days when I was chairing the strategic board, we were talking about accommodation, because that was obviously a major cost that you had to meet, and part of the scheme was to move down to the data centre at Newport, which has obviously been carried out. Just how much use is still being made of the original buildings, because we had two buildings up at Blenavon. So with the NHS gone, NWIS, and just about everything else pulled out of there, or being pulled out of there to get to Newport. So where are we at the moment? Are we in a position where we can get out of Blenavon altogether and look for basically cheaper premises, or just update me on that?
Yep, no problem. So as you're aware, the business case that we kind of put together when you were chair of the board, with your support, was about moving, for everybody else's benefit. We got two quite sizable buildings in Blenavon. One can house about 120 people, the other one probably a bit less. The downstairs of the one building was all data centre. It was all racks, computers, and all kind of fibre connections and set up to run services. The downstairs of that, 2 halls are empty and have been decommissioned, and all the aircon, all the generators at the back have gone. There's only one left now. So that's in the process of being decommissioned. The Gwent Police Hall is still there. It should be gone by September, which then allows us to completely decommission the downstairs. We closed TKID 2 back in March 31st, so we didn't have any commitment to this financial year. And we're in the process of moving location in Newport Civic as well to somewhere that won't cost us what it currently costs us, hopefully free even, we're waiting to see. So we've reduced our estate costs probably in half over the last 12 months as a result of that. And when we do have the downstairs returned back to office space in Blenavon, there is a next phase on them, which is that the most suitable location for us as a service? Because there'd be no need for us to be there from an infrastructure perspective, because that is now all in Newport.
But a major part of TCID 1 is the CCTV centre, isn't it? So included in those schemes would be relocating that then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, so opportunity for me to ask a question and make an observation, I suppose. So I think you said you have 6 partners which you serve, and clearly those 6 partners have different priorities, different objectives, And I'm making the assumption that there's a tension between what they want and how quickly they want it. And that tension has to be managed somehow. So maybe it's a question for you, Matt, or possibly for Sian, and really it's about how much authority and influence does the Monmouthshire County Council have in terms of making sure that our priorities are delivered by SRS and and SRS not delivering priorities of other partners. Are you able to say a few words about that, please?
I'd welcome the opportunity to say a few words on that for the purposes of the live stream. I'm Sian Hayward, Head of Information Security and Technology. I'm going to try and weave in some answers to some of the questions that you've asked on this already, because I manage the SRS contract as it is. It's not an actual third-party contract, it's not an external contract, it's an amalgamation of all the various IT departments from these organisations. We've just lifted them up, put them in the same space where we've made efficiency savings, where we've got sort of a much tougher resilience to any events that go on. We share expertise and we collaborate on different systems and procedures. I manage the budget. So the £2.3 million that we've got going into the SRS, I manage that budget as well as the SLA with the schools. So I'm the person who designs the SLA for the schools, and so if you want any questions on that, I'm absolutely prepared to come out and talk to your school governors along with Matt. I manage their workloads. The SRS does nothing without asking our permission and getting our say-so first. It's not our permission exactly, it's how we direct our organisation's workloads, how we direct our digital projects, how we direct our digital aspirations of Monmouthshire into the SRS. People will always focus on the little things. My laptop's not working, they must be rubbish. I mean, that is absolutely not the case, because I have found the organisation to be absolutely excellent in providing the infrastructure. We've got it all set out, we've got it budgeted so that we can refresh it. There is nothing that's not managed to death. There's nothing that's not audited to death. So we have absolute assurance that their performance in those areas is second to none. I have the monthly meetings with Kath, where we manage their performance indicators and make sure that they're doing things that they should be doing. We also have what's called a business and collaboration board, where we talk with our other partners about collaborative projects, and that collaboration is really important to us. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. No, we don't want to be doing things on our own, but we are a unique organisation amongst those 6 organisations that run out the SRS. So Monmouthshire's digital aspirations for delivering its community and council plan may require a different sort of resource going through to push all of our digital projects forward, and they may require a different resource and cost than we currently have. So every year we manage that budget accordingly. So we'll go to the SRS and say, this is what Monmouthshire aspires to do. How are you going to support us in this? And then that goes into the SRS's own strategy document and their operational plans. They have to charge us for that. And I often use the analogy that if I have one washing machine with a service contract, I don't expect 5 washing machines to be serviced under that one contract. If I want more, I have to pay more. And I think that the SRS is sometimes expected to pull the rabbit out of the hat and, double up on its workload and work 24 hours a day. And that's not sustainable in this line of digital work. We cannot operate as an organisation without digital services, and I absolutely 100% monitor everything that they do, and they do it extremely well. So that's a little bit of an insight into the governance arrangements around it. When we're talking about the TCBC audit of the EdTech services, they're talking about the wires, the bits of infrastructure that sits there and how the SRS has dealt with that. What Monmouthshire is responsible for is our business activities. And if we want our business activities to change, we have to pass that aspiration over to the SRS. That's not subject to the Torvine audit. That's subject to our own internal auditing and governance procedures that we have here. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you. I can see Martin's got his hand up, so Martin, please.
Thank you, Sean. That was in some ways very helpful, but it did open up one question up to me. You said we took our staff and put them over there. Are you saying that some of the staff in the SRS are still employed by Monmouthshire County Council?
No, I think that because we can't physically employ members of staff to go into a big pool and then refresh that pool as and when it's needed to. What we did was we amalgamated all of those various IT services, and they are hosted by the SRS for personnel services, really, for terms and conditions and pay. So the Torvine will host the SRS, pay the staff, put their contracts in place, but I actually pay the budget over for those staff. So if I think I've got 42 members of staff that Monmouthshire pays for, it might be slightly more now, I actually pay the cost of their salaries over to the SRS.
Okay, just checking the language, because so effectively when the service was set up, we 2P'd them over to Torvine. Okay, thank you much.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I think that wraps up that agenda item. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kath. May I suggest you stay for the next agenda item, just for the TCBC audit. But please, then, you feel free to go if you so wish. Okay, I've got problems with my computer. It wants to shut down. So let's try to. Yes, is that the SRS fault? Pick up. Yes. Yeah. Nothing's working. Good. Okay, we will carry on. Okay, agenda item 8. So this is the Torvine Internal Audit SRS Annual Internal Audit Report and Audit Plan for 23-24. I think I'm right, and yes, I can see Mike, because welcome to you, Mike Cochrane, who's Group Auditor with TCBC. Thank you for your papers, much appreciated. Assume we've read the papers, but please take us through the papers highlighting points of note, Mike. But first of all, can I suggest you set out your role and responsibilities in respect of the SRS, especially for new members of this committee. So over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to you all. I'm Mike Corcoran. I'm the Group Auditor employed by Torvine that provides the audit service to the SRS, which, as you know, you're one of the partners of. The report that's in the pack is one that we've presented, so thank you for the opportunity to present that. It covers the work for the year up to the 31st of March 2023. The annual opinion is within it. There was enough work conducted to provide reasonable assurance. We can never provide total assurance, only ever reasonable assurance. We've covered the SRS's system of internal control, so that's its adequacy and effectiveness of its framework of governance, risk management and control. The opinion this year is satisfactory. That's defined in the document, but basically that is sort of a limited number of medium risks. Low risks, maybe 1 or 2, no individual assignments that are classified as high or critical risk. We did 12 pieces of work, 11 of which required opinions. There were 10 full opinions, again, that's defined in the document. 1 substantial opinion, again, defined in the document. Further improvement, again, this year on previous years. The plan was challenging. It was flexed to accommodate operational issues within the SRS. Disproportionate amount of effort in the latter part of the year, which saw us do 6 systems audits, 5 follow-up audits, and the 1 advice consultancy piece of work. We've only had 4 findings this year, which is incredible, really, to be honest, and does show the direction of travel that we've come on since 16. In terms of next year's plan, it's around 108 days. It comprises 4 systems audits, 6 follow-up audits, 2 advice consultancy audits, again, which are detailed in the document. We're doing more work in the same number of days with less findings. So basically, the relationship is working well. We're covering everything based on a risk-based plan. The 5 projects that were mentioned by Matt, I can guarantee they've been audited. The CCT that was mentioned by one of the members, I can guarantee that's been audited. So I think we are covering all your bases that you require to be covered. The relationship is working well. There's not much more I can really say, to be honest, at this time.
Okay, great, Mike. All that sounds really positive. So thank you. I'll go to members just to check with any questions or comments. Rather surprisingly, there's not. Clearly, beg pardon, Martin.
Trying to get my hand up and unmute all at the same time, and I think I just about got there under the wire. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you. Yeah, really, really positive report, and clearly, as you said, there's a real strong direction of travel. If there are weaker reports, how do they get communicated out to the 5, I guess, governance and audit committees that you're supporting? Do you share those with the heads of internal audit of each of the individual organisations for them to share?
Thank you for your question. Every report follows the same process that was devised from the beginning. So planning, the planning stage of the audit will go out to all partners. They'll be asked for any views to feed into the scope to make sure we're auditing the right bits, if you like. We then do the work, we come back, we have a meeting with the SRS staff who are responsible for the things that we've looked at. That will result in a draft report. That draft report we have an exit meeting for, whether it's good, bad, in the middle, whatever. That produces a final report. That feeds its way through senior management and into the Finance and Governance Board, which is attended by every partner. So Peter Davis, for example, is from Monmouth. We don't specifically send the reports to the heads of audit because that was never asked for. So we've never done it, to be honest. We may have shared, I think Andrew Wathen in the past asked for certain reports. So we did share them. We will share them if asked. But that wasn't the process that was required. So that wasn't the process we followed, basically. Okay,
and from a governance and audit committee perspective, we tend to get more exercised about those which fall into the below the line category, the limited no assurance ones, and there aren't many, if at all, this year with it. So, okay, well, I think if that happens, then it's certainly a conversation between you and Jan about how this committee learns about them and more specifically learns about what we're doing to fix any things that do emerge. So I think that'd be helpful. Can I ask you one other question since you're on the line? Later on in our agenda, we have a paper from Jan talking about sort of streamlining the way we set audit committee, audit report categories, the full, reasonable, etc., etc. The paper we are receiving today is getting Monmouthshire to adopt the ones which are in line with SIPFA's categories. You're using categories of full, substantial, etc., which means we get individual audit reports in 2 different directions, which actually use different language to say the same thing. And I just wonder whether Torvine, I presume the way you use it is the same way as Torvine uses it, so whether Torvine is thinking about adopting a SIPFA rule so we all have a standardised way of talking about assurance levels.
The short answer is my boss hasn't said anything yet, so I can't say yes or no. It may well be on his plate to deal with, but he hasn't mentioned it. But I think basically whatever the opinion that you get, the focus is on how many issues there are, the gravity of those issues, can they be resolved? And, you're in a fortunate place with the SRS that things at the moment are going well, and there can only ever be an opinion which at the moment says substantial or full, basically. But I will go back to Peter and ask him if it's on the cards and let you know.
Yeah, please do. Thank you. If you liaise to Jan, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So thank you, Mike, for a very helpful presentation, and look forward to sort of further content. I beg your pardon.
I tried to raise my hand.
Sorry. IT problems. Well, SRS in the room, we can blame them, but maybe not. Tony, ask your question.
Yeah, you've got a bar chart and a graph on page 15, and it indicates that in 15-16, none of these issues you picked up were serious, they are low or medium. What sort of issues are you picking up on the 15-16, 17-18 to 19, when it started to peak down, as you might say, where you seem to get on top of the issues you were obviously picking up in the years previously?
Thank you for your question. To be specific, I'm going to have to go back and look in the plans for 15 and 16. But basically, if you can imagine when the SRS was formed, and as Sean has mentioned, you had IT sections coming together, new processes being devised, new policies, for example. So we've done a lot of work over things like cybersecurity. The CCTV was a bigger one years ago, so it was getting a handle and a working relationship on what was in the new organisation. So there would have been, as you'd expect, greater issues back then when things weren't as well defined as well as in operation. And I think because that's progressing, things have improved. But if you want specifics, I can probably provide something over the previous years, but it would take some doing.
No, I don't particularly want specifics, but what it seems to me is that we've you've got on top of the system, you ironed out the minor and medium risks, and you increased your capacity, which suggests that you're more efficient.
I think the relationship has improved, which has increased efficiency, and the management of the SRS works well. Audit works well with them. The staff of the SRS are knowledgeable and skillful. It helps the audit process.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just come in as well?
My laptop says there's something went wrong with my hand.
Okay. Just wanted to update as well. What we recognised around 16 was that we needed dedicated resource to be working onto the audits and then ensuring that that work was getting plumbed into our programme plans. Up until then, there wasn't really a strong, robust process around it. So we have a process now where we dedicate 30% of our working capacity to looking at security and ensuring compliance with security controls. Before we do anything else, then we've got 10% of our allocation purely for audit, and then we start to work with the partners around the partner priorities for their core planned work and their projects. So at that point, we did have a high number, probably up around 100 of open actions that we needed to work through, prioritise. As I say, it's just been chipping away over the years, having that dedicated resource in, having that feedback process through the monthly delivery groups, because they didn't exist at that point, to ensure if there were significant pieces of work that needed to be prioritised, partners understood why we were doing those. So, and as Mike says, I think we've developed a much better working relationship, and partners now understand exactly where those audit priorities need to sit. So we've got that prioritisation there as well.
Okay, thank you. That was really helpful, and yet again, a very, very positive picture. I suppose, going back to Martin's point, I think I need to reflect on the linkage between the reports and the good news that you're currently articulating and what this committee sees, because we see very little. And I think that additional level of comfort would be really, really helpful, and I'll pick that up with officers here in due course. Okay, unless there's any more, I'm happy to move on to item 9. But just to reiterate, Matt, Kath, Mike, please feel free to go, unless you're suckers for punishment and wish to stay, which I'm sure you're not.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, move on to item 9. This is paper presented by Sean Haywood, who I should have said earlier is our Head of InfoSec and Technology. And the paper's on freedom of information, data protection, and breaches and data subject access requests. One hell of a mouthful. Okay, so Sean, as always, assume we've read the paper, but please take us through highlighting points of note.
I will. Let me turn my mic on first. Yes, you've got the report in front of you with all the statistical data. And the report basically takes you through our performance in dealing with freedom of information requests and environmental impact regulations, data breaches, and data subject access requests as well. Now you've got all the statistical information there, but I'd just like to take you through a little bit of what's involved in the legislation and what we have to do every time we get one of these requests coming in. So if I can take the FOI first, and I have described some of this in the report itself. Members of the public are entitled to receive any information that we've got recorded. We don't have to make it up. We don't have to make it up if we haven't got it recorded. The environmental impact regulations are specifically for environmental requests, things like planning or land-based requests. They can be received by us from any channel, whether it be email or a conversation with an officer, whether, as long as we get their details that we can respond to them. It can come in through social media channels. We can receive any question from any channel. But when they come into us, they need to be forwarded to our central FOI team that deals with both FOI and EIR requests. We have to respond within 20 working days. If we don't, we can request an extension, but that's the legislation. We have to respond within 20 days. And we can signpost people to information that we've already got stored elsewhere on our website, for instance. If we don't respond in the 20 days, or people are unsatisfied with the way that we've responded to their request, they can ask for an internal review. We get a lot of internal review requests because people object to our response because they don't like what we are saying, basically, rather than the fact that we haven't provided the information that they think we may have, or we've applied an exemption that they disagree with. But I can only do an internal review on ones which are specific to the information that we have or haven't supplied them. I can't comment on whether I think that information is right or wrong. They'll have to put a complaint in if they want to do that. So if I move on to data breaches, we get quite a few data breaches that may be near misses, so they're not really data breaches, or they may be quite serious. And if we have a data breach that we consider to be quite serious, we must report those to the ICO. And data breaches are things of a personal nature. If somebody happens to have sort of like lost everybody's bank account details or something, and they've gone into to the wider web services, and you see it all the time. I had a couple of emails this morning from my own personal providers of services who've said they've had data breaches. For a local authority, data breaches are reputationally harmful, but also we've got a lot of sensitive information on children's services, on adult services, on vulnerable people. And those data breaches, if they were to get into the public hands, can be very harmful to those people that the breach has gone into. When that happens, we have to report that to the ICO within 72 hours. And we do that, even stuff which is reported to us on the weekend. We don't have many of them that are reportable, but the ICO then will sit there and decide whether they are things that they need to give us some sort of punishment for in the forms of a fine or something. And in most cases, the person whose information has been released gets to know. We inform them that their information is gone. And that's very distressing for people if that happens. With the subject access requests, people are entitled to receive a copy of their records. So they can write into us. They can email us, they can fill in a form, and then we will ask them for information of their personal details so that we can search all of our systems and places that we hold personal data on anybody. And then we have, I think, 1 month to respond to those people with all the information that we hold. And if you can imagine, if somebody comes along and asks us for any information we've got relating to Sian Haywood, we'd have to trawl through every single system, every single email. There's all sorts of things that we have to trawl through. Then we have to redact that information, so we're not inadvertently releasing other people's personal information when we send it out to them. So we're not creating a data breach there. These data subject access requests can be quite extensive, with absolutely loads and loads of pages of information that we sometimes send out manually to people, as well as electronic. And they're increasing in complexity all the time, as are our freedom of information requests, as are our data breaches. They're getting more and more complex as people are doing more and more online, and we're keeping more and more of this information, some of it which may be on paper as well. When we're talking about children, it may be paper records from before we went digital. So that's just a little bit of an added background as to the processes that we're involved in. And we do hit our targets extremely well. We didn't previously. During COVID, we struggled because all our resources and the service department's resources were spread around elsewhere, and responding to some of these requests wasn't considered a priority at the time. Now, if you have any questions on the statistics in the report, I'm more than happy to receive them from you. If I can just bring the report itself, which I've just lost. But we've also got Catherine Evans here, who works with the detail all the time. She could possibly answer some of the queries that I may not be able to. So are there any questions from anybody?
So thank you, Sian, and thanks for your offer of answering some questions, which is quite fortunate. So we have a couple. We'll start with Rodri, please.
Thanks, Sian. I've got a question on the FOI and one on data protection.
Yeah.
In terms of the FOI, 4.41, obviously there's an anomaly with the COVID year of 2021, but we can see relatively consistent requests received, improving percentage of requests closed on time, but obviously quite largely percentage-wise increased in terms of the internal reviews. So I was just wondering if there'd been a change of process, or whether there was changes to quality checks in the FOI process, anything like that. And then a question about 6.1 was about the training, and obviously 78% completing mandatory training to me seems low. So I was just wondering what's done to monitor whether people are doing it, and what processes will be put in place going forward to ensure greater compliance.
In answer to your first question, I think the public are more aware of the information that they can get from us, and often where they've not received a response from our service areas, a direct response from them, or they can't find the information elsewhere, they'll think, right, I'm going to stick in a freedom of information request. Often, and on those occasions, the freedom of information request will only give them stuff that we actually have recorded, and they're expecting to see something different, and that's why we've got an increase in FOIs, an increase in the technical content of them, whereas they used to be easy to respond to. Now we've got to find information from the whole authority, and then when they get that and they're disappointed, hence the increase in internal reviews. The internal reviews are quite costly in my time and my colleagues' time in trying to solve them. So we would love to resolve all these queries informally rather than go down the internal review route. But people are becoming increasingly angry and anxious about the information that the council holds for them. That's not to say that they are not nice to us, but they are dogged and that they want to keep getting that information and trying hard to get that information. On the training side, yes, 78% would seem extremely low. Actually, it is higher than that now, I believe. But even though it's mandatory, we are more concerned with people actually learning and knowing how to deal with things than we are with ticking a box. So if we were to send out the training documents, you know, a lot of the training is e-learning, and we have a little quiz at the end to find out what people's knowledge is. If we were to just tick a box and be dishonest, we would say that we've got 98%. But we want to know who has actually learned something, and we target those high-risk areas, such as social care, or areas where they've got a high number of breaches, perhaps. We target them all the time just to keep retraining and retraining and retraining, because we want to reduce the amount of data breaches that we're getting. So we are very honest in saying that 78% of people are trained, and it is supposed to be mandatory. It is mandatory on when people join the authority, but of course some people joined before it was mandatory, so it's catching those people, but we will target the high-risk areas. I'm not sure whether Kath wants to come in on any of that.
Yeah, I was just going to add a little bit. My name's Kath Evans, I'm the Data Protection Officer. Just to add, with the training, we do target those areas that deal with personal information. We'd love everybody in the entire authority to do it. That would be great. But of course, we do have a lot of employees in Monmouthshire who don't deal with personal information at all. So obviously, as Sian alluded to, we don't prioritise those as a target. Obviously, anybody within our social services who are dealing with reports and information and dealing with people, anybody within sort of planning, these different departments where they deal with a large amount of their priority, and their managers are incredibly supportive and make sure that they are done. And we renew that every 2 years. Okay, so that's renewed every 2 years with their training. It is online, as Sian mentioned, there's online, but I also do quite a lot of face-to-face. So in certain areas, such as children's services, such as care homes, for example, they asked me, could I work with some of the carers on personal data, and we do sort of bespoke training online or in person, and to provide that, or in any area where we've seen more breaches perhaps, and then again I'll do some bespoke training for those teams. If there's been a concern, then I will put something together bespoke for them. On schools is another one. Schools have more training. We do a separate training module for those. Again, that's mandatory, and the head teachers are very good at making sure everybody's done that. Probably if I went to the schools, the percentage would be well above 78, and that's different because it's obviously slightly different what they deal with. They deal with a lot of social media information as well, and that sort of thing. So, we tailor that to them. So the 78 is for the overall entire authority corporately, but there's a lot of other stuff that goes on there behind that. Okay.
Can I have a supplementary, actually, to the 4.4? I don't expect you to answer now or have the statistic, but I just wonder, going forward, obviously, if, in terms of those internal reviews, it'd be interesting to know how many were upheld, and actually how many did we have to go back and provide further information?
All of the internal reviews that I've had have been upheld. We haven't had a problem there. We do have a slight problem with some persistent or vindictive complainers, but on the whole, nothing that we've ever done has been catastrophically wrong, and luckily, or maybe the expertise of our staff in our department, who've been there for quite some time, we are very good. A lot of authorities don't separate out freedom of information from environmental regulations. A lot of authorities don't really worry about, making sure that people understand it, that we've got a culture of people that understand it. And we have got very different situations in schools who are their own data controllers. as our members. You are responsible for your own data. We are not responsible for your data. So, you know, we try and adapt all of the training that we give out for your particular circumstances.
If I may, just follow up on the training point. So, I understand the logic entirely. I get it. I suppose, is there anything we can do as a committee to support you in driving those numbers up? I'm thinking in particular about the accountability of chief officers, you know, because they are responsible for ensuring that training is done, especially if it is mandatory. So what can we do? How can we help you ensure that chief officers actually sort of are accountable for helping you?
Well, we are the Audit and Governance Committee, so, you know, if this information goes back up to Jan as our auditor, you know, if the awareness is there that not everybody is complying with the training, and let's be fair, in your working life, you're extremely busy, and then you've got this person saying to you, do this training, and you know what, we get that, but as long as you were supporting us in that quest to get 100% training in, because sometimes we think that people don't hold information or they're not particularly sort of need to be included. You've got, for instance, in an example, our school bus drivers, they're holding information on where to pick the children up, you know, so they need to understand how this works, and for cybersecurity purposes as well, because cybersecurity, we've got all the physical arrangements in place. What scuppers our cybersecurity is people. People sort of like bypassing the systems and processes and, you know, inadvertently clicking on links. And that could be anybody in any part of the organisation. I hope that helps.
It does. John Davis, Head of Finance, wants to come in at that point.
I think, Chair, was just to clarify some of the work maybe that's going on around the corporate training system, which I think overall is going to help with capturing that data, where those deficiencies lie in terms of where staff haven't been able to access that training. I think that's an area that we've identified as being weak and something we need to improve on, and certainly that corporate database is going to help you know, as we move through the implementation and get that on board with all of the relevant training areas that need to come into that.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. But just going back to this training, so one assumes it's possible to break down completion rates, training completion rates by service directorates or whatever you term them in this council. If that was easily achievable, could that be sort of done and reported back to us next month, please? Because I want to understand, in particular, you know, levels of completion of this mandatory training in respect of DPA by service directorate. Is that possible, Kath?
Yeah, I could break it down to a certain level. The problem with that is we have such a high number of turnover, particularly in certain service areas such as social care, you know, and that's difficult to know from one day to the next how many staff they've got. But I can certainly put something together so you've got more of an overview of roughly where we are on that at that snapshot moment.
Okay,
and I can try and do that for you.
Apologies, accept all those qualifications. Yes, if you could do that, please.
Yeah, I can
be quite helpful. Yeah. We'll move on because there's some other questions. Martin, you were next, please. Okay.
So not entirely to move on, picking up some of the comments of the last few minutes, just to check on the looseness of some of the language. Mandatory means mandatory. So some of the not focusing and not targeting on certain groups because they don't handle confidential information. If the suggestion is we make some groups of people not mandatory, then I'd be supportive of that if I could hear a reason why. But as it currently stands, mandatory means everybody, and we therefore need to focus on everybody. So I fully support Andrew's suggestion that we dive in on that. The second element of that is there any sanction? We go back and remind people, Sean, you suggested some people have been here a long time before they got involved in the induction. Perhaps that's why. That's even more terrifying for me, that they've been here for a long time and they haven't done the training. Is there a sanction, like removing IT privileges from individuals who fail to do the training?
I'll leave Kath to answer the question on us sanctioning things. However, we cannot remove the IT services from people. They may be social workers, they need their IT services. So for business continuity reasons, that is not a sort of like a penalty that we would wish to impose. We're trying to get people to use more of it rather than penalising them for that. However, I'm sure that with the introduction of Thinky, which is our product, and maybe Kath can add to that comment from me.
Yeah, absolutely, certainly. Thank you, Sian. The mandatory is mandatory. I agree completely. It's very difficult to get hold of everybody. From our point of view, we can't necessarily. So, of course, I work very closely, or try to work closely with all the managers. Lots of reminders. We do 3 weeks during the year: one in January, one in June, one in October, where we have Data Protection Week and Cybersecurity Week. Within that, we try and push that back out. We try and encourage more people to take the training throughout that, just to raise the awareness of that. With the new LMS, Learning Management System, I think it's called, it's got the acronym Thinky that Jonathan mentioned recently, that will show us exactly, Andrew's asking for the chair's asking for exact percentages. They will be, once that has rolled out, they will be available, because everybody in our staff will be on Thinky, and everybody will have to complete it, because otherwise it will show on, you get badges, and otherwise it will show that you do not have the badge. The GDPR training, we've already put it onto Thinky, and we've rolled it out with social care. That's already sat there, so just the social care area are working that, trialing that for us. So within the next month or so, we should be able to see that everybody in social care has had it. And once that then rolls out to the rest of the authority, that would be able to make sure that mandatory absolutely means mandatory, and we would be able to see, and I would be able to see who hasn't, and then my targeted emails could be far more targeted in that case. I very much welcome the move to Thinky, I have to say.
Okay. And just if I may, to follow up on that, the list of data breaches by type on page 26 of the bundle, clearly emails are the biggest ones where people have sent it to the wrong person. Yeah. If when you're doing your work there's any correlation between those who haven't been trained and those who are sending erroneous emails, that would be fascinating to see. And again, I presume the individuals who are creating these errors, data breaches, a quiet word is had with by you to remind them of their responsibilities.
Not so quiet. It's not such a quiet word, I have to say. And we do, when it happens, we do have to ask if somebody hasn't done the training. We do ensure that they do it. We even ask if people have had a data breach that we feel to be a little more serious, even if they've done the training, we ask them to refresh it. And that may be with us on a one-to-one basis, or that may be that they just go back online and they do the online training again. I will say, though, of the last, certainly both breaches that we reported to the ICO last year, and both of them hot off the press this year currently, the ones that we've reported to the ICO this year, in those cases, all of the staff responsible for those breaches have done the training previously. Which is why we've had responses back from the ICO on each of those occasions to say, no further action from themselves, recommendation, it was put down as human error. Systems were in place, staff have been trained, we've followed up adequately, to contain and to inform, which is what we always ask to do, the ICO would always ask us to do. And on each of those cases, then the staff responsible have been trained. Unfortunately, due to human error, those mistakes, accidents, whatever you could, have still happened.
And if I can, just one last one. It's helpful to see the number of breaches, and you can see 69 raising to 89 last year.
Yeah.
Do you have any way of putting that into context? Are there publicly available information for other local authorities, so similar local authorities? Are we an outlier? Are we firmly in the pack? And that would adjust my level of concern, I guess.
Yeah, anecdotally, we are very similar to our partners because we have regular meetings with our local authorities, particularly within the SRS group. We meet as data protection officers. We're quite similar. What we're interestingly doing, and actually the report for them is going to be in tomorrow. They want this reminding me to send it. The report for them is tomorrow. We have a South Wales Information Forum, which is all the data protection officers from the whole of South Wales, and we've put together a questionnaire, a survey, and we're going to compare our results, so to speak, these sorts of statistics across the whole of South Wales, and look at those, because of course we talked about in meetings what we might call a data breach. In another authority, it could be a data incident. We might call it a data incident. They go, well, it's not. They would call it, but so vice versa. So obviously, there's a lot of. It's quite subjective, some of these things. So we're looking now as a South Wales forum, not just a local group, at putting some of those statistics together to compare those. Whether I will have anything that's reportable on that from that, or whether it will just open up the questions for us to look at. But hopefully we would have some more comparative data to be able to share with yourselves maybe next year, or, whenever we review this again, or certainly anecdotally look at and discuss those similarities and differences.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on. John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sian, can I just take you to 4.5, where the service areas are, and perhaps it's me, but I don't quite understand. If you look at the first 6, there's been an increase in either reporting or we finding out, being better at monitoring. And then the last 2, there's a great reduction. I just wondered, I can't get my head to that really. I just wondered whether you could explain, please.
Were you looking at the number of FOI requests, that table?
Yeah. When you've got like children and young people, last year we had 49. This year we've got 64.
Yeah.
And so on. And those top 6 are all the same increase in, yet the bottom 2 are greatly reduced.
Yeah. If you look closely at the dates, so we've got 2020, 21, 22 was when we were in the middle of COVID, and that skewed some of the requests that we got, and also our ability to deal with those requests, if I'm honest. But we are on the general trend is up, and we are getting increasing demand in all areas. And in enterprise, if you notice, that's gone up quite significantly. And a lot of that will be things like planning requests and things like that, because the enterprise has changed its boundaries slightly. So it looks as if that's gone up a lot, but because enterprise has changed the services that it delivers, they will have gone up, and perhaps other services will have gone down when they move out of that particular directorate, then put it that way. But we are seeing a general trend to an increase, and also an increase in complexity of all of those requests.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't want to minimise the data breach, but 70 emails is nearly 80% of our data breaches. And looking at the figures, it would suggest to me that they're probably to outside sources with schools and social care. But when you consider that we maybe have 500 million emails a year, is that a good context to put it? No data breach is a good data breach, but am I correct in assuming that most of those data breaches will be to outside sources and internal and outside sources rather than purely internal data breaches?
You're very right. The number of emails that we send out or receive every year is massive in comparison to the number of data breaches. It statistically is quite insignificant, but most of those data breaches is where perhaps people have selected the wrong recipient for their information. That's not always sort of like devastating, because the wrong recipient could be somebody who already deals with that area of work and they just inadvertently pick that person up. So it's easy for us then to actually go back and say, please discard that. It may be another local authority, it may be another officer of the council, so they're already receiving that sensitive information in the first place. But
Did any of those get to an ICO?
Sorry?
Did any of those get to an ICO?
No, I don't think they have.
No, we wouldn't, just to jump in there, thank you, Sharon, we wouldn't report anything like that to the ICO, because the threshold for reporting to the ICO is really when you make the consideration, what harm could that email do? Would there be any harm? So, for example, a name and address or contact detail, a contact number going to somebody completely external, maybe in a children's services case, going to a completely wrong family, then you could say that yes, there could be some harm to those people, that involvement, those children. There could be harm with that information being shared. That's the sort of thing that we would consider sharing with the ICO. It go into the wrong department, it go into trusted colleagues in Blaenau Gwent, for example, we wouldn't think that there would be any harm to come from that, because we can contain it very confidently, and that information, we can be confident of our colleagues, certainly internally, certainly with other local authorities and health boards, you know, that they would contain it. They sign containment forms for us, they report back that they've deleted it and they will not share. Where we do report to the ICO tends to be when the information, and very, very few, if you think about how many there are, tends to be when something has happened and the information has been shared externally in a situation where some of the people or some of the information that's been shared in that document could cause harm, be it stress, anxiety, or actual maybe physical, and we have had examples of potential for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for all those questions, and thank you, Sian and Kath, for those for one, a very helpful paper, and two, answering our questions so carefully and clearly. Just one final question for me, I suppose, in relation to paragraph 1.1. You make reference to policies and procedures that are in place around this topic. I'm just wondering what the governance arrangements are and sign-off for those policies are, because this committee does not see or has no responsibility in respect of, for example, data protection policies, whereas I would expect it would. Have you a view in terms of, one, who approves those policies, and two, where this committee should be reviewing them itself?
Absolutely, you are the Audit and Governance Committee, so you can see all of those policies and the governance arrangements around them. We have what's called an information governance group, where we have it's chaired by me as the authority's senior information risk owner. I'm where the buck stops if something goes terribly wrong and we make an awful data breach. So I chair the information governance group. We've got members of our team on that group, and we've got members for every directorate on that group. So if we have a change in policy, then it's sent out to all of the members of that group who review it. But they get to see just about every sort of policy, whether it's an information policy, a data protection policy, a cybersecurity policy. All of those policies are on our intranet site for anybody to have a look at. You can have a look at those policies because they are available for everybody to look at. We try to keep them up to date, but the best will in the world, if you're not looking at them month by month, almost, with the IT services changing, then they do go up to date slightly. But yes, we are very, very hot on particularly the cyber policies and the information governance policies, because that's where we have to ensure that people are learning, and we have a culture where people are very cyber aware, very breach aware, very aware of the value or the harm that can come from all of the information we hold as a local authority. We can operate without money, but for a day or two. We can't operate without information even for an hour, so we do not want to lose it. So yeah, we do have policies.
Okay.
And you are able to ask for those to be brought here if you want to.
Good. That is the right answer, so thank you. So I do. So Wendy, so what is the action? So the action is, I'll give the action to Peter Davis and he can delegate out as appropriate. So Peter Davis to consider what policies this committee should periodically review and recommend for approval across the authority. Thank you. So Sian, Kath, thank you for your paper once again, very helpful, very interesting, as you can tell by the questions you had. You're welcome to stay, but equally you're welcome to go if you so wish. We'll move on to item 10. Item 10 is the internal audit report for the last year. This is presented by Jan Furtek. His job title is Audit Manager, but he's our de facto interim Chief Internal Auditor. So welcome, Jan. Assume we have read the paper, but please draw to attention key areas of note.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report is the annual internal audit report for 2022-23. It provides the overall audit opinion on the internal controls operating within the County Council. It will give you a summary of the work undertaken and also outlines the performance of the internal audit team during the year against their preset targets. The internal controls operated within the Council are of complex nature, reflecting organisational arrangements, and internal audit plans its work to address the major risks that the authority faces. Audit is not designed to check the work of others, but to comment on the controls in place and to protect the Council from the loss of assets or any inefficient operations, whatever the cause. So the 22-23 audit opinion has been based on the planned work undertaken during the year. It was felt that overall the systems and procedures in place were adequately controlled, although some risks were identified which could compromise the overall control environment. The overall opinion, therefore, is of reasonable assurance. Section 2.2 of the report details my annual statement for the year, which details that reasonable assurance opinion. Within section 2.4 of the report, this details how many opinions have been issued during the financial year. So we had 7 substantial opinions, 10 considerable opinions, 4 reasonable, and 1 limited opinion. The internal audit overall opinion of reasonable is also based on the work undertaken by the SRS, as we've heard earlier in the meeting. So that's been taken into consideration, and that's included within Appendix D. So the extent of our coverage, so internal audit team's resources was reduced over the course of the year as the previous audit manager had left just before the start of the last financial year, and a senior auditor post was also vacant. So both of those posts were vacant for the entire year. Within the audit plan, vacancy provision for both of the posts was included, as agreed by the Governance and Audit Committee, but that was only for a 6-month period, so we weren't envisaging them to be vacant for the entire year. So this obviously affected the overall completion of planned work. Over the course of 2022, the Chief Internal Auditor continued in a dual role, acting in that capacity for both Newport City Council and Monmouthshire County Council. Since he left the authority in April 23, this arrangement has been put on hold while both councils assess the best way forward regarding their operating models and delivery arrangements for the internal audit service. Due to the vacancies, as I mentioned, additional resource was procured from an outside agency. It was envisaged that 4 audits would be undertaken by this outside resource, however only one of them was delivered and issued in draft by the 31st of March. So they've been rolled forward into the 23-24 year, which we'll come on to in that audit plan. So the audit coverage, so the full list of audit reviews completed by the team within the year is shown in Appendix B. Just to bring to your attention, the 1 limited assurance opinion which was issued, so details of that are shown to you in Appendix C, so that's the reasons why we felt that it would be a limited audit opinion, and that was in relation to Our Lady and St Michael's RC Primary School. The added value and any non-opinion work conducted by internal audit is included in Appendix F, and that's mainly financial advice, monitoring of agreed management actions and recommendations, and completion of the annual governance statement. Section 5 of the report just gives the committee a brief update on where we are with any unfavourable audit opinions that have been issued. So during 22-23, the team continued to follow up any audits that were having a previous limited audit opinion, and the tables over the next couple of pages show the current status. It's pleasing to confirm that where the most recent follow-up review has been conducted, the area examined has received a more favourable audit opinion. So as of the current status, we've now followed up all the audit opinions with the exception of Tinton Old Station. That one is currently ongoing and the audit fieldwork is currently underway. And the other one that's outstanding is Our Lady and St Michael's RC Primary School, and that is envisaged to be followed up during Q3 of this year. It was pleasing to note that no major frauds were identified during the work undertaken during the course of the year. The internal audit team continues to be responsible for coordinating the National Fraud Initiative on behalf of the Council, which is an initiative run by the Cabinet Office. The Council's data has been uploaded for the current exercise. Matches have been returned from the Cabinet Office during January to March 23, and my team are currently reviewing those matches to verify if there's any concerns which need to be further investigated, and we will report them in as accordingly. So in terms of the audit team performance then, so Appendix G shows the performance of the team where we managed to complete 72% of the agreed audit plan, which was against a target of 82%. As I mentioned, that was non-completion of the plan was due to the limited resource that we had within the team during the year. 100% of the audit team's recommendations were accepted by management. We generally had quite a good turnaround in terms of getting reports out. So draft reports were issued to clients within 4.4 days of the completion of the fieldwork, and final reports were issued within 8.5 days. And after every audit, we issue an audit evaluation questionnaire where they were returned 100% were either satisfied or very satisfied with the service that they'd been given. So in conclusion, it's been considered that over the course of the financial year, the objectives of the team have been met. The objective of the team is to provide assurance to management and members of the Council on the adequacy of the internal control environment, governance arrangements and risk management processes within Monmouthshire. And I'd like to acknowledge the support of the staff within the team, as well as senior management, in continuing to provide a comprehensive and valuable service to the authority. So I'm asking the Governance and Audit Committee to receive, comment on and endorse the internal audit report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, very clear. Let's go to questions then. Start with Tony, please.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. Point 5.6, you said it should be noted that due to the impact of COVID, Tinton Old Station was closed for much of 2020 and 21, etc. Does this inquiry, this investigation or audit review go back into 18, 19? How old is this audit review really?
Yeah, so the Tinton Old Station audits, the original audit review was done in 2019-20. Yeah. Obviously, due to the pandemic, the actual station and the operations were closed for a substantial period of time. So we need to, when they reopened, we needed to make sure there was sufficient time for them to embed any new processes and procedures out there. They have had major changes, and it's now being fully brought back in-house, the operations out at the old station. And as I mentioned, we are in the process of doing the follow-up audit as we speak. I had a meeting earlier on this week about it. So that's ongoing. So hopefully we'll be providing a revised opinion to you shortly.
You say it's been brought back in-house. Well, the Tinton Old Station has always been in-house. Are you talking about the catering facility?
It's the catering facility, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Colin, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in relation to the school, as particularly highlighted, could we have an overt assurance? I know you've said generally that no frauds have been detected, but that funds have been examined to the extent that you could say there isn't a substantial loss at the school. That was the first point. And the second point was generally that some of the processes as described would have been against procedures that would have been agreed financially, and particularly in the use of the credit card. Was there? Do they sign for it and sign an agreement that they will only use the card in a certain manner, such that it'll only be used by the signatory, which is the case I know in some other local authorities?
Yeah, so in terms of has there been any frauds identified at the school? That I've spoken to my team and they've confirmed that there wasn't any overt issues in terms of fraud, theft, misappropriation out at the school. It was just a general lack of control across certain areas, which obviously resulted in the limited opinion and the number of issues that were identified during the audit review. So there's nothing to be expressly concerned about. And from our point of view, the head teacher has been fully engaged within the process, and which has obviously been quite pleasing from our point of view as well. In terms of the, like you mentioned about procurement cards, so yeah, my understanding is that all officers should have to sign to say that they accept the terms and conditions of the card, and obviously the transactions are then monitored. In terms of where we're going forward with this, obviously we'll do the follow-up review, and hopefully any issues that we had during that original review will have been addressed and controls will be in place.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Traditionally, we don't like unfavourable examinations here. I know the old station is now run by Mon Life, isn't it, or well, the catering is. Obviously you're getting a lot of cooperation from Our Lady. So any idea what time scale is likely to be before you can come back to us with even if it's an interim report on it? As I say, we do tend to jump on unfavourable audit opinions, and we don't like them dragging on.
Yes, of course. So seeing as it's end of quarter, will be end of quarter one tomorrow, it would be unlikely that in my quarter one report, which will be at your next Governance and Audit Committee meeting, that we'd be able to provide you with a revised opinion, just because the work is currently ongoing. So I could possibly give you a verbal update at the next Audit Committee as to where we are with Tintern Old Station. In terms of Our Lady and St Michael's, that work's not due to be completed probably until quarter 3, quarter 4 of the financial year, just because the report wasn't issued in final until I think it was about April time. So we need to give them sufficient time to be able to embed any new processes, because they could have changed something, but we need to make sure that's been fully embedded within the systems out at the school. So we'll provide the hopefully good news as soon as we possibly can to you.
Yeah, I think we'd be happy with verbal responses on an ongoing basis. As I say, you know, the worry always is, and we've seen it in the past, that these unfavourable opinions, they tend to sort of drop down until it comes up in a major report, and we say, well, what on earth happened to that? You know, so yeah, keep us updated.
Yeah, will do. I'll give you a verbal update at the next meeting.
Okay, so to remind members, we're being asked to endorse the report and audit opinion for the year in question. Unless there are any other questions or comments from members, I think we can safely do that as the conclusion to this item. Thank you. Let's move on to item number 11, which is the draft internal audit operational plan for the current financial year. Yet again, presented by Jan Furtek, our de facto Chief Internal Auditor. Jan, please assume you've read the paper, but remind us what you are asking us to do with this paper, please, and then draw out points of note.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So this report is to inform members of the Governance and Audit Committee of the work that's going to plan to be undertaken by the internal audit team at an operational level for the 23-24 financial year. So when developing the audit plan, consideration is given to over 300 possible areas to audit across all services provided by Monmouthshire Council. These are risk assessed and allocated high, medium or low risk, and then the internal audit team resource is then allocated to cover the higher risk areas as appropriate. For 23-24, it's been calculated that the total available days for the audit team amounted to just over 1,400 days, and that's based on 5.5 full-time equivalent auditors within the team. Due to current vacancies, the plan has been based on 1,155 total available days. We then take out an allowance for annual leave, sickness, training, management time, administration, and that gives us the operational audit days, which would then amount to 728. That would also include a 70-day provision for any special investigations and unplanned work that might arise during the course of the year. So this figure of 728 8 audit days also includes 40 days and estimated 4 audit jobs where we plan to bring in an external audit resource to support the team, and it's planned that will be funded from any budget surplus arising from the Chief Internal Auditor and Senior Auditor vacancy periods. But this is a point to note that if that additional resource could not be procured, or the cost of this resource exceeds the available budget, then that might be a future risk area in completing the audit plan. So at that end, so at the time of writing the report, out of an establishment of 5.5 full-time equivalents, there were 2 vacancies within the team. The substantive Chief Internal Auditor role, which I'm currently undertaking, of 0.5 full-time equivalent, and a Senior Auditor vacancy of 1 full-time equivalent. It's pleasing to note the recruitment process for the Senior Auditor has been completed, and they are due to start with the authority in August. So the audit team is currently headed up by myself as the audit manager, taking on the responsibilities of the Chief Internal Auditor post, while we consider the long-term vision for the service and possible wider collaboration. And as I mentioned earlier, the shared service arrangement with Newport City Council is currently on hold. When fully staffed, myself as the audit manager will be supported by 1 principal auditor, 2 senior auditors and 1 auditor, which takes it to 5 full-time equivalents. Consideration has been given to the appropriate level of resources for internal audit at Monmouthshire County Council, and the establishment of 5.5 full-time equivalent staff remains just about adequate for the current level of risk as outlined above. But obviously a greater audit resource could give members of the committee greater assurance and management that would allow us to be more responsive to changing priorities and risk profiles throughout the year. And it's worth noting that if there were any unplanned absences, such as long-term sickness, or any prolonged special investigations, that could significantly affect the audit plan, as any cover within my team would be limited. So the 23-24 draft internal audit plan is attached to Appendix 2 to this report. So as I mentioned, the audit jobs have been risk assessed and prioritised to match the available resource within my team. This will be reviewed on an ongoing basis throughout the year to determine the appropriateness of the risk assessment and where my audit resource should be deployed to make sure we cover the high risk areas or any emerging priorities. Overall, we envisage to conduct 45 opinion related jobs and 22 non-opinion jobs, which have been included within the audit plan. And as I mentioned, the audit plan will be kept under constant review to reflect any change in priorities, and any material changes to this plan will be reported back to the committee at the earliest opportunity. So the Governance and Audit Committee are responsible, as per your terms of reference, to approve and monitor the internal audit plan over the course of the financial year. I'll present quarterly reports to you, informing the committee of the current progress against the approved plan, highlighting any potential risk areas, all the opinions that have been issued, and I'll give you a summary of any unfavourable reports. And it's your responsibility to hold officers to account to provide adequate oversight of the audit process and the organisational controls of internal control. So I'm asking committee to review, comment on and note the draft audit plan contained with Appendix 1 prior to its approval at the next meeting. Right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Very clear. Questions or comments for Jan, please? Tony.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again. I take you back to item 3.8, where you seem to be juggling from week to week, year to year on your internal audits because of the lack of all the staff you would like. And before you came to this authority, this committee was critical of the lack of the full resources needed for oversight of audit services. We're still in that same position really now, where we would possibly need to rely on external resources, which are expensive, to carry out our your full audit program. Is there any way of seeing this being resolved so we've got a full audit team, so we don't have to rely on external resources, which are expensive and would probably cost more than what one of your officers would take? And on your closing remarks, you said it's up to us to look at the oversight of how you operate your department. So it's just a thought on that particular aspect of how you will deal with these external resources, the need for an external resource when they do apply. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, so obviously we'd like to be in a position where we don't have to procure external resource because it is expensive and they don't have the organisational knowledge per se of Monmouthshire as internal staff would do. Obviously, as I mentioned, we've recruited to the senior auditor vacancy, which would take the team up to full complement of staff minus the 0.5 full-time equivalent for the chief internal auditor role, which is currently being discussed. And we're using the vacancy for the first 5 months of the year of the senior auditor role to be able to buy in that additional resource. So in theory, next year, if we've got the full 5 members of staff, we won't have the budget available to procure additional resource from an outside agency. So we shouldn't be in that position next year. Obviously, it goes without saying, I'd love us to have more internal audit resource, but we've got to balance that up against the risks for the council and the available funding.
So we do have a budget surplus of half or 0.5 of a post equivalent to the chief internal auditor, which would really release sufficient funds to employ a lower grade auditor to supplement the system.
Potentially, we'd have to work that through. There is issues in terms of recruitment across the audit teams, across Wales, across the UK at the moment, and it's trying to find someone that's would be sufficient in doing that work and making sure that fits the available budget as well.
So the question I'm really asking is, do we need half a chief internal auditor?
That'll be for Peter as the chief officer to decide. But as I mentioned, we're looking at the delivery model of the internal audit team at the moment and possible wider regional collaboration as well.
Okay, thank you. So a very important discussion, and thank you for raising it, Tony. So in paragraph 318, Jan draws our attention to the current sort of headcount situation and describes 5.5 full-time equivalents as being just about adequate. We're running currently below 5 and will do for the whole of this year, noting the possibility and no more than the possibility of recruiting external resource for specialist projects. Given this information, I am concerned by the position as outlined. I do not think it acceptable. So my suggestion is, subject to your approval, is Wendy notes in the minutes that this committee expresses its concern over the current resourcing position, current and prospective resourcing position of the new council's audit team, and believes it to be inadequate, and requires the Cabinet and Council to instruct officers to take appropriate actions to remediate the situation. That is my suggestion. I'll look to members for their comments on that particular point. Nods or shakes of heads. Okay. Phil, would you like to come in there?
Jonathan's looking very studious there. I just wondered whether he
always does.
From a senior officer point of view, had any view on that?
Well, very happy to hear views, but I want the members' views first, just to ensure. I'm not seeing any points. I'm seeing nods generally. John, would you like to come in on this point?
If we take into account Welsh audit, clearly we are not fulfilling our agreed times of offering the update of our accounts. We've been looking at this for the last 12 months. We've been receiving some answers that are not being fulfilled. And I am certainly concerned, being a member of this committee, that we will not be able to fulfil our obligations on time, and that will then put us in a much different position. We're already in stress position, as our accountant said, John, and the money that we're trying to save or not trying to save will outweigh our position in the situations we're in.
Thank you, John. I'll go to Martin next. Martin.
Yeah, I fully support that proposal. I mean, if barely adequate is 5.5, then obviously anything below that is considerably worse. we are losing hundreds of days, as paragraph 3.6 shows. I want to come back on a further item, but just to support your proposal, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Let me go to John Davis, our Head of Finance, just in case he has any comment, and I'll come back to you, Martin. John.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's the committee's right, obviously, to come to that resolution. I think the only observation I would add is that we have lost the head of audit post considerably recently. I think it's right that we have a period of time to review those arrangements, as Jan has said, and look at those models of delivery. I think whilst that recommendation can be put in place, I think it needs to make an allowance for a period of time for that process to work its way through, given the difficulties that Jan has alluded to in the market. But I think obviously leave it up to committee members to come to a resolution on that. But just wanted to add that I think that time would be sensible to allow that to happen.
Thank you. Your comments are noted. However, I would expect for senior officers across the authority for there to be a robust succession plan in place. But it doesn't seem to be in this particular case. So I am somewhat surprised by the anticipated delay before we come to a revised target delivery model. But I'll leave that at that. Phil.
Can I? Is it appropriate at the moment to say what sort of wider collaborations are being considered, or haven't we got to that stage yet?
At this stage, it's just tentative discussions between chief officers of a number of local authorities. So yeah, I can't go into too much detail at that stage, unfortunately.
Are we talking a South East Wales type collaboration or a smaller one?
There's a few options that are on the table. Smaller mergers, wider mergers, but like I said, those discussions are currently ongoing.
So thank you. I'm aware of discussions in the round. I don't think it's appropriate to make those points in the public meeting, but it's the anticipated timeline associated with that which is my concern. As Peter Davis, Deputy Chief Executive, outlined to us the last meeting or meeting before, it could take several months or indeed a year or more before that comes to fruition, which I don't view as being entirely acceptable, but I could be persuaded otherwise. Tony.
Yeah, just to follow on from what Phil has said and what Jan has commented on, I don't want to talk about what you're doing in collaboration, but suggest to me that you'll be filling in at the top rather than filling in at the bottom. Would collaboration on a wider sphere give it more efficiency to your audit programme rather than have somebody on the ground to do the audit work?
Yeah, so all those points have got to be examined as part of the business case for looking at wider collaboration, but it could wider collaboration could mean that we get additional resource within the team in terms of specialist provision. For example, in the team at the moment, we don't have anyone qualified to undertake IT audits. We don't have anyone with IT audit skills, as Torvine do, hence why they audit the SRS. So potential collaboration could result in us being able to access additional specialist IT audit skills as well as financial audit skills as well.
Yeah, thank you. One final point. One final point from me. I would expect this committee to be consulted in respect of this proposed new delivery model. Martin, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My point is so Para 3.6 talks about the available days of 1,430 based on 5.5 auditors, and it says due to current vacancies we're down to 1,155. The next paragraph, 3.7, goes on to say that's further reduced to 728 to take out a chunk of time for sick leave, annual leave, training, management time, etc. That 1/3 reduction of the total available days feels very high to me, and I wonder, Jan, whether you've got comparators with other organisations it's almost like we're at a time where we haven't got enough auditors to deliver the work we need to deliver, yet we're losing a third of our time. Admittedly, of course, leave is a statutory requirement and sickness we can't measure. The other things, however, we absolutely can. And I just wonder whether that's in line with other organisations. It feels rather high to me.
Yep. Thank you, Martin, for your comment. Yeah, in terms of the calculation, it is done on a scientific basis and based on what non-productive days were done by the team over the previous year. Obviously, moving from Newport City Council, I've used a similar model to what they've currently used in calculating that. So we are similar with Newport. I can't comment on other authorities because they do their available days calculation slightly different. And there's different things that we do in Monmouth that other authorities might not do, in terms of making sure we have annual appraisals and regular team meetings and regular one-to-ones with staff, which obviously all time needs to be taken out of available days for doing actual audit jobs then. And as well as providing members of staff with time to be able to do training and ensure they keep their CPD up. So for a qualified auditor, there's a requirement of 40 hours a year of CPD and training. So we need to build that into the plan. So that does take out quite a big chunk of time for each auditor just in training. That's only qualifying CPD as well. There's other courses which Monmouthshire Council might want us to attend, which are non-qualifying. So we need to build all that into the audit plan. But I agree, it does seem on paper like a big chunk that's been taken out, but it is done on a scientific basis. It's not just plucked out the air.
Okay, I guess my request is if you could look at that and if they could squeeze more productive time out, it would really help us, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and trust me, I've done that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then let's turn to the detail of the operational plan then. So thank you yet again for the paper. Broadly happy with the shape of it, albeit I don't have a detailed understanding in terms of several elements within the plan. But if I turn to Appendix 2, the Finance Corporate Accountancy subsection, where you intend to look at the insurances. I assume that's corporate insurances, which is fine, bearing in mind it hasn't been reviewed for some time. But given what John Davis, Head of Finance, has said earlier on in the meeting about the continuing expense challenge we're facing as an authority, and the fact that one assumes that further expense savings will need to be made over the period, I was quite surprised you haven't built that work into your audit plan, unless I've misunderstood it. Because of what I'm anticipating is further expense savings to be made across the authority, and service managers, heads of, to be required to make savings and to go through a structured process of risk assessing where those savings can be made in a safe way. That's my expectation. I may be wrong, and I maybe ask John Davis to comment in a few seconds. But why hasn't that element been factored into your plan, unless I've missed it, of course?
Yeah, so obviously there's a lot of documents that underpin all of this, so everything has been considered for the audit plan, and I have had discussions with John in terms of what audits we include within his area. I totally get your point in terms of the savings that the authority needs to make, and that is one of the reasons why I've come to you with a draft plan, and it's for committees kind of input. If you want a particular area to be further considered for inclusion within the plan, then by all means I can take that away and consider that and maybe try and build some time in. Okay, John, do you want to come in at that point?
I think, Chair, just to give some reassurance to committee that as part of last year's budget outturn, Cabinet requested of the senior leadership team to undertake more close and regular financial monitoring arrangements of all services for 2023-24. We know we've embedded a significant amount of pressure into the budget, and also, as you rightly say, some of those risks and budgetary risks around non-delivery of some of those savings that have been built in. those arrangements are up and running, and we are meeting regularly with those services that we term as presenting a high budget risk for the year, and we're also meeting regularly with those officers who are responsible for delivering on those budgetary savings. I think the one other thing to note, I guess, is that, when we talk of internal audit reviews, they do tend to be backward-looking by their very nature, and I think those arrangements that I've just explained give us a more real-time access to the action that's being taken by services to reduce their costs overall. So I understand the position that you're trying to come to, but I think we can take reassurance from the measures and additional measures that we've put in place through our monitoring arrangements for this financial year.
John, thank you. Fair comment. Yes. Planned, I think that's the term you use here, planned internal audits tend to be, by their very nature, backward-looking. But for other types of audits, so for example, Jan and team could do what I would term a real-time audit or a special audit, looking at the current situation and prospective design of processes for sort of managing expenses out of a business. So my suggestion, and I'll look to the committee members in a moment, is that further consideration be given to including something along those lines in the plan. Doesn't need to generate an audit opinion, but I do think there's something there about providing some level of comfort over the processes John's set out and the potential, not just financial risks, but operational risks and delivery risks to the services arising from making those expense savings. I'm not seeing anyone shaking their head, so please take it away, have a think about it. Are there any final questions or comments on this item? No, good. Let's move on. Move on to item 12. It's the internal audit opinions and weakness ratings. Yet again, Jan, over to you. Assume we've read the paper. Paper's very clear, but please, over to you, draw out matters of note.
Right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so during a previous meeting, the Chief Internal Auditor gave a commitment to review the opinions in use by the internal audit team. It's current practice for all public sector internal audit teams to provide a summary opinion on the final report of each internal audit engagement. Currently, Monmouthshire County Council operates with 4 audit opinions, 3 being positive and 1 unfavourable, and these opinions are based on the strengths and weaknesses identified during the course of each audit review. So the audit opinions currently in use are substantial, considerable and reasonable, which are all positive, and then limited, which is unfavourable. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIPFA, commissioned a special interest group to examine the range of audit opinions in use across the UK public sector. And in 2020, they delivered a report called Internal Audit Engagement Opinions, setting common definitions. And they set out a number of advantages, which are included in the report, as to why audit teams should use a standard set of opinions. So this report is asking committee to endorse that we accept these common definitions and common opinions, and they're based on current existing practice and the public sector internal audit standards definitions of internal audit. So the new opinions are going to be substantial assurance, reasonable assurance, which are the 2 positive opinions, and then limited assurance and no assurance, which would be the 2 negative opinions. For grant claim audits, we'll continue to use the terminology unqualified, where the grant terms and conditions were generally complied with, and qualified, where there's issues with it and breach of terms and conditions within the grant, which will be reported as needed. And in line with the public sector internal audit standards, all reviews will be continued to be followed up and reported into senior management and the Governance and Audit Committee as appropriate. All unfavourable audit opinions, which will now be limited assurance and no assurance opinions, will be subject to formal follow-up procedures completed by the internal audit team and result in an updated opinion brought before the Governance and Audit Committee to provide assurance or not that the control environment has improved. So while reviewing the definitions of our internal audit reports, we've taken this opportunity to amend our individual weakness ratings, which we use in our report. The aim of this was to provide a clearer definition of the key risks to the organisation. So currently it's based on a traffic light system ranging from significant, moderate, minor, and then strengths. So the traffic light system will continue, but the risk rating and the classifications will change. So the red, which was previously known as significant, will change to critical, which will now be a major risk or an acceptable risk which requires immediate action. The amber, which was previously moderate, will change to significant, which would be defined as an important risk that requires attention as soon as possible. And the yellow, which we previously reported as a minor, would now be called moderate, and that's where the risk is partially mitigated but should still be addressed. So I'm asking Governance and Audit Committee to approve these changes to the internal audit report opinions and the weakness definitions, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you once again. Phil?
I think that's very sensible, Chair. It makes it much clearer, far easier to understand. Would probably cut down quite a few questions because it's just so much more obvious than it was before.
Thank you. Martin?
I'm thrilled by this, Jan. It's something I've been banging on about since I joined this committee, about having ratings which are standardised. The more we can get towards the standardised, so the public who actually see these reports can understand and compare across local authorities, would be it makes it all far more readable, more obvious. One really small point of detail: there's a couple of documents which are embedded in the report, and obviously on the website we can't read them because they're not in the report pack. If you could share those with committee members, that'd be helpful, just for completeness.
Yeah, no problem. I'll share them with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there's a result, Jan. You've made Martin happy. So, yeah, so life can't get any better. Okay, let's move on because time is still against us. Item 13, forward work plan. It's largely for noting, but very happy to take any questions or comments from members or officers. I take silence means that we're all okay with them. Clearly, any comments, please come to me and or Wendy offline. Item 14 is to confirm minutes of a previous meeting held on 30th of March. I'm not going to turn the pages because the minutes are usually excellent and the current set are excellent as well. But please highlight by exception any sort of matters of factual accuracy or of other matters to note, please.
Happy to move, Chair.
Okay, seconder, please. Colin. Oh, good. Okay, thank you for that. All good. And then the final item to note the date for next meeting, 27th of July. Committee meeting will be at 2 p.m. with pre-meet at 1:30. Invites may have gone out already, but I'm not too sure, but we will check that. Okay, in conclusion, thank you for your time, thank you for your contribution. Happy to take any feedback on my chairing this meeting offline, and happy to chat with members as appropriate. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Super. That's finished.
We out.